It's all about you. Black Country Extra.
Heart pills, check. Inhaler, check. Imodium, check. Ha-ha! We're back! Welcome to Nostalgia and Comedy on Black Country Extra. I am your host, Dave Dinsdale. Welcome to the wonderful world of Dinsey. With me in the studio we have as my co-host local historian and roving reporter Paul Jennings.
Hello.
And special guest, show business legend Johnny Shawaddy Sorrow.
Evening.
In today's fun-filled and jam-packed programme, we shall be reminiscing about Mad O'Rourke's very little pub company with Pete Towler, who is the licensee of Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory in Tipton, and we shall be talking about the life and career of Johnny Sorrow with the man himself. And of course, we shall be playing more of the old adverts. But first, I've had an email from Mary Parks of Rowley Regis. She says, "Dear Why Don't You? If I turned off my television set and went and did something less boring instead, I wouldn't be able to watch you. Barky bad. Oh, P.S. Why do you never play Duggie Brown telling the parrot joke on your show?" Good point. So to start us off, here is a clip of Duggie Brown, including the world-famous parrot joke.
This fella's got this little parrot, you see, and he's teaching it how to speak, and all it'll say is, "Oh, is it?" Like that. Well, he goes out to work 8 o'clock one morning, and at 9:30 there's a knock on the door, and the parrot said, "Oh, is it?" See, and he said, "It's a plumber I've come to when your pipes would let me in, please." And then the parrot said, "Oh, is it?" He said, "It's a plumber I've come to when your pipes would let me in, please." And then the parrot said, "Oh, is it?" He said, "It's the plumber I've come to when your pipes would let me in." And then the parrot said, "Oh, is it?" He said, "It's the plumber I've come to when your pipes would let me in." I forgot the end. Doing right well as well then. I know all the characters like do you want to dance? You can dance. I know all of the characters. There's only the two of them. There's the parrot who's in the cage, and I know he said he said "Oh, is it?" See, and then this chap's outside, and he said. "What do you mean?" Oh no, that was me earlier. No. He said, "It's a plumber I've come to in your pipes. Let me in, please." The parrot said, "Oh, is it?" The parrot's in the cage, and he did say right enough. He said, "Oh, is it?" See. And then this chap's outside, and he didn't say it's the plumber I've come to when your pipes will let me in, please. That's where I've gone wrong. He said, "It's the plumber I've come to when your pipes will let me in, please." Angrily. He went on for about 4.5 hours, and he's screaming and shouting his head off. And in the end, the blood pressure got the best of him. And he collapsed in a heap on the stairs, and at 5 o'clock the man came home from work. Well, he fell right over this body, and he looked down and he said, "Oh, is it?" And the parrot said, "It's the plumber he's come to."
Good that is, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's real proper comedy. That's probably the most famous joke they ever had on the comedians. Now, we are here at Black Country Extra. I have to make a confession. I am not a Black Country person. I adore the Black Country. I support a Black Country football team. But I'm actually from Birmingham. And my first introduction to the Black Country came because of my father's friends from school. And they had a little domino group. And every Tuesday and every Friday they used to go out to the Black Country because beer in Birmingham at the time was absolutely terrible. And once I turned 18, they invited me out, and the first pub that I ever went to in the Black Country was in Netherton, and it was the Old Dry Dock.
Yes.
It's an absolutely fabulous place, and unfortunately it is no longer with us. It's been turned into a housing development. And as a strange aside, one of the next pubs I went to was called Mar Pardo's, which is also in Netherton.
It used to be my local.
I didn't know much about Netherton, but my introduction of it made it seem like Shangri-La.
I think they set the bar a bit high for your introduction into pubs, to be honest.
So we're going to talk about the Mad O'Rourke very little pub company, and we have our local historian here who's done a wonderful little film for us. So how did that come about?
Well, basically, I was tasked with the onerous job of speaking to the man who actually owns the pie factory in Tipton, and Pete Towler. So I went down undercover, clandestinely, with a false beard, and went in there and had 2 pints of lumpoma gold and a pie called a scabios.
That sounds luxurious.
It was absolutely gorgeous. I suffer for my art, I really do. Unfortunately, he wasn't there that week. He was away on holiday, but you know, I tried to hide my disappointment in pie and beer. But I got talking to the people there, typical black country people, good as gold, and I arranged for the interview for the following week, and met Mr. Towler the following week and sat down and spoke with him, and he was totally brilliant, absolutely charming, and a great ambassador for the Black Country, and, you know, let's not be too surprised about this, his own enterprise.
Well, I've heard your interview. It's really, really good because it tells you so many things that you don't really understand. And obviously he struggled with lockdown as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
And he introduced, was he?
Pies by
post?
Pies by post.
So how does that work?
The man is an absolute entrepreneur. He'll give Richard Branson a run for him. I expect him to get his own spaceship in a couple of years' time. But if anybody's going to do it, Pete Towler will do it. It came about because obviously his business was suffering.
Yeah.
So he hit upon the idea that he was doing takeaway from like a hatch door at the side of the pub.
Yeah.
But then he hit upon the idea, well, why can't I send these throughout the UK? Or he started off sort of small and local pies by post.
Yeah.
And he had the pie thing is slightly different in as much as it's encased in pastry, suet pastry, so it travels better, a bit like a fine wine.
Yeah.
And so you can either have a 6 pie pack, which to me is utopia. If any of my kids are listening out there, this is what Daddy wants for Father's Day. Okay? So you get a 6 pie pack.
Yep.
Or you can go for the other option, which is 2 pints, because he now bottles his beer.
Yep.
2 bottles, of his local, lumpoma,
Yep.
and a pie in a presentation pack. I wouldn't mind if he came in a bin liner. I wouldn't, give it me in any way, shape or form. And it's took off, and he uses a local courier service, I think DHL, and it's took off, and he goes all across Britain, and he's guaranteed 24-hour delivery.
That's amazing. Okay, well, you put together a little film for us. So here's a little taster. This is Paul Jennings, our local historian and roving reporter, interviewing Pete Towler in Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory in Tipton. It is recorded on a main road, so you will get some background noise, just so you know.
What springs to mind when you think of Tipton in the heart of the Black Country? William Perry, the Tipton Slasher world champion boxer. The extensive canal network carrying goods all over the world. Or maybe the industry encapsulated in Tipton. Yes, all those things. But I want to talk to you about an institution that's been with us for a number of years and is now a successful company, again, thanks to the efforts of Pete Towler, entrepreneur, ex-chef on the QE2, Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory.
Where are you from originally?
South Wales.
Yeah, I thought I'd heard a bit of a twang.
Yeah, so
People always think I'm Irish, but that was Colin's department. But no, I find the Black Country people very similar to the Welsh. Very nice, very friendly human beings. So yeah, I actually don't go back to Wales very much. I love, I married a Black Country girl. I love the Black Country in every way. So I enjoy coming to work now and again.
I understand that you've got a long connection and history with the Mad O'Rourke pub chain as it was. Do you want to just tell us, in your own words, how you started with Mad O'Rourke's pie factories?
Yeah, it happened many years ago, something in the region of 30 odd years ago. I used to work on the QE2 as a waiter, and I seen this lady in the Queen's Lounge, which is a really posh area, with a very little pub company sweatshirt on. And I said to her, I knew some pubs, i.e. the Pie Factory and the Dry Dock, the Lumphammer Beer. She said, yes, I own those. And that's how I met Sheena O'Rourke. And we got on very well. We were off Madeira at the time, and I was just on a world cruise. You don't get off on a world cruise. So she gave me a card and said, if you ever want to get into pub management, give me a ring. So after the world cruise, I gave her a ring. Colin was more of the creator. He came up with the idea, Sheena ran, and Sheena was great. We got on very, very well. And then I always remember the interview, Sheena's there, and dog was running around. He decided to pee on the floor right in front of me. I thought, this is interesting, So they offered me a job as assistant manager, because I never worked in pubs, at Droitwich, and I lived there for a bit. So they were having trouble here. It wasn't doing as well as it used to do. So she said, do you know the Pie Factory? And I said, I certainly do. And said, do you fancy giving it a go, running it? But the beauty was I was close to my daughter. My daughter, I remember she lived in King's Heath at the time. And she got on the bus here once, stopped the bus over there. She was ever so proud the bus ticket actually had the Pie Factory on the bus ticket,
That was a destination on the bus ticket?
Yeah. So it's really,
wow.
Slowly but surely I ended up being their ops guy, especially on the food side. I brought in all the food ideas, new ideas.
So hang on, who was responsible for the Desperate Dan pie then?
Well, that was Colin's idea,
right?
Without question, but you don't know, in one pub you might have been totally different to what it had been in another pub.
Yeah.
Basically, some of the pubs, smaller pubs, used to say whatever's left over, and we weren't happy with that, so we wanted to. That's what a Desperate Dan pie is. That's how it should be. And that's,
so you standardised it, basically?
Yeah, I standardised the whole food around the business.
Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory went on to hard times, was sold to Usher's, a large brewery down in Wiltshire that has hit hard times itself and is no longer here.
I've heard of Usher's at Trowbridge because they made pretty decent beer. I like Usher's beers. And the MD, Peter Brooks, I think was his name. He's all smart and knew how to run the world type of person, especially Black Country pubs. And he came in with his big wigs and said, and Sheena and Colin, that was it. They were gone. They didn't offer me. I don't think they offered me a job because I was going to go with Sheena and Colin anyway. They felt that their beer could automatically come in, and they didn't even bother with the Lumphammer branding or anything like that. And that's where their biggest mistake was, in my opinion. They forgot about the Black Country concept. They thought, Peter Brooks was a big national figure in the brewing industry. He thought he knew it all, and obviously he didn't, because they went bust. I think on the back of this deal, I think they went bust. In the end, I basically had enough, and I left, and that was in 2000, and Desperate Dawn, who's always been the chef here, that's what we call her. She's
Desperate Dawn
from Tipton,
yeah.
And she's only just left really due to health purposes. A great friend of mine, and she kept ringing me, said, "Oh, it's going downhill," and it really had gone down, down to silly, terrible figures. So I rang Usher's at Trowbridge up and said, "You're not doing very well in Tipton. I want to buy it." And he said, all right then. And
that was a heck of a opening sales ploy, that was, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's quite simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I found the money somehow and bought it in August the 1st, 2000. I remember that day very well.
That's amazing.
So you didn't know all these things, did you?
Well, this is why we're talking to you, Pete. This is why we're talking to you.
It's good that, wasn't it? Paul Jennings, all the way from Tipton. Did you enjoy your day out?
I loved it.
So how long did you get with him?
Just over an hour, about an hour and a half, sort
Okay.
of, something like that, yeah.
So what did you learn?
I learnt a lot more about Mad O'Rourke and apparently his ravishing wife.
Yes.
And actually about the company as a whole, because it was quite an enigma, because we all thought we knew about Mad O'Rourke because he was a good self-publicist.
Yeah.
But you only knew little bits, a bit like Pablo Escobar. Sorry if Mad O'Rourke's listening. I'm not equating you to a Colombian drug baron.
You can get addicted to them pies.
Oh, you certainly can, but it's very hard to shove one up your nose.
I don't know. Depends how many you've had.
Well, you sent out there because there is so little information about the pub chain
Absolutely.
on the internet,
Yeah.
and the pub chain was actually sold in 1999. I've done a bit of research myself. In 1999, which is sort of pre-internet or around the time the internet was
Yeah.
taking off, so there's very little there, and there's very little on YouTube, which is an absolute tragedy because they had a portfolio of about 15 pubs at one time.
I know.
So what was your favourite
My favourite pub?
of the Mad O'Rourke chain? Yeah.
It's got to be the Dry Dock, because it was very, very close to my home.
Yeah.
I lived over the fields. Just a bit of trivia here. The start of Rosie and Jim, it goes past this just shows my viewing taste. Rosie and Jim, it goes past, when it's on a narrowboat, it goes past like an old building with a big chimney stack.
Yep.
And that's Cobb's Engine House, which is not very far from the Dry Dock and midpoint between my house and the Dry Dock pub.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, yes, the Dry Dock. For the Dry Dock pub, can I just tell a little anecdote?
Please.
This will be clean. I once, when I was on a course, it was a nationwide course, but based in Birmingham. I drew the short straw. I could have gone to London or Manchester, but no, I drew Birmingham. Love Birmingham, but you know, I'm used to the nightlife. Anyway, a lot of people from around the country came, and we were hosting it because we were from Blum. So I took them to the Dry Dock. And for those who don't know the Dry Dock, it's actually a narrowboat inside the pub. They had to take the roof off to get it in, and the staff stood inside the body of the narrowboat, and the gunnels were the bar pools. So you're effectively, the customers are standing outside the narrowboat.
Yeah.
On the one side, to get down to the kitchens, it was quite narrow between the narrowboat and the wall, and the swinging doors, and the girls, the serving staff, were coming to and from the kitchen.
Yeah.
Because it was narrow, they got the trays above their heads. Now, one wag idiot from Liverpool thought it'd be very, very funny to mime grabbing this lady's breasts. It wasn't acceptable then, it's definitely not acceptable now. She gave him a look that could strip paint off an oil tanker, and he dropped his hands and she walked off. Served, she came back, and him trying to make amends, put his hands up as if to go, you know, ta-da-da-da-da, to the girl. She reached down, grabbed him straight between the legs and squeezed hard. And you know those novelty frogs, those rubber frogs that you and their eyes bulge out. It went like, and I just looked at him. I looked at him, he's crumpled up, and I just said, never mess with the Netherton wench, mate.
True. Johnny, do you have a favourite Mad O'Rourke place?
The Cradley one.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I have to go with you on that one. The Sausage and Porter,
That's it.
because I'm a huge sausage fan anyway. At the time, you know, we're talking about the beer and the fact you couldn't get any decent beer in Birmingham. You couldn't get sausages either because we hadn't had the sausage revolution. So you get sausages, but it's all that sort of slime inside a tube. But if you went down to Mad O'Rourke's Sausage and Porter in Cradley Heath, you got the real stuff.
Quality.
It was quality. And they had a quiz night on a Monday. I used to go down there as well. It was lovely. That's lovely. And they've closed it down. Turned that into housing as well. It's
Disgusting.
It is. It's a terrible shame. Terrible shame. But they also did comedy as well at Mad O'Rourke's.
Yes, never ever did a Mad O'Rourke gig.
But who did?
Frank Skinner.
Frank Skinner did it, and who else? Victoria Wood.
Did she really?
Victoria Wood was a student at Birmingham University,
Wow.
so she performed at Mad O'Rourke's upstairs, and she was also a barmaid at a pub called the Sportsman in Harborne, which is now I think the Garden Hop House. Yeah, so she has a connection with Birmingham, and when she filmed her show, Victoria Wood is seen on TV. That was filmed in and around Harborne.
Was it?
It was. So there's a very nice shot of the Royalty when it was still open, the old bingo hall. And Acorn Antiques, the exteriors, were actually filmed in Harborne, and the building that they used is now called Acorn House.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
You are amazing. You really are.
It's terrible, isn't it?
No, it's not terrible. No, it's not. Honestly, no. Please, never stop. Never stop giving us your little kernels of knowledge.
Well, look, I want to talk about the Mad O'Rourke thing because they were taken over. Now, I believe they were struggling financially
Yep.
as a group,
Yep.
although Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory was always doing very, very well.
Yep.
Great little pub. And what I heard is that a brewery from Trowbridge in Wiltshire called Ushers
Yeah.
had an awful lot of money, and they thought they were going to expand. So what they did, they actually went round looking for a pub chain. They heard that Mad O'Rourke's was up for sale, so they went and bought it. Now, I went to all the Mad O'Rourke's. Do you ever do a Mad O'Rourke trail?
No. Only on my own.
Because they had a trail, and you'd go and buy a token. So one year it'd be coasters, another year it'd be glasses, sauce. I've still got my sauces.
Oh.
I have the whole collection, and if you get the whole lot, then you get something like a beer pull or a candlestick. I still have my candlestick. I still have my picture.
So wait a minute. When somebody says, well, how come you know so much about Mad O'Rourke? You can say, I have my sources.
Okay.
Hey!
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 Always working. Always working. Yeah, so they had this wonderful trail. So I knew all the pubs. I know that they had one in the Belgrade Theatre in Coventry, which I didn't go to. But I think I went to almost everywhere else, and it was just a wonderful experience. And then Ushers of Trowbridge came in, paid the money. We're not sure the amount. A figure of 3 million has been thrown about. I'm sure I read on Teletext at the time that 6 million was thrown about, but it could be a bit of bravado in the media, you know. And so I went back to Mad O'Rourke's Pie Factory to see what it was going to be like, and it was terrible.
Yeah.
So they took out the lump hammer. One of the reasons you go is because you go for the Mad O'Rourke brand, and they had their own beer, which is called Lump Hammer, and they took it out and they put Usher's beer in, and it was terrible. And Ushers then realised they'd made a huge mistake. They sort of ran the pubs into the ground and were eventually bought out. And do you know who bought them out? King Jong-un's father. He wanted to set up a brewing business.
The North Korean
The North Korean
dictator.
dictator. He wanted to set up a brewing experience in North Korea. It's all true.
And he then hang on, run that by me again, Dinsey. So the North Korean dictator's father
Yeah.
came to the Black Country.
Who was the dictator at the time?
Yes, yeah. Well, obviously, came to the Black Country.
No.
Oh.
He had an intermediary from Germany,
Oh.
and he said, right, we want to set up brewing in Pyongyang. Do you know anywhere where we can get some stuff? And this guy said, yeah, there's a factory in Trowbridge in Wiltshire. They're struggling a bit. You can have their stuff. So they did. They bought the whole lot, and they transported the whole lot to North Korea, Pyongyang. It's still brewing. And
But you can't get in.
can't get in. And you know,
It's rammed every night. Yeah.
you definitely can't get out. And that's how the brewing industry started in North Korea. So indirectly,
Yes.
Mad O'Rourke's is partly responsible.
It's got a lot to answer for.
It certainly has.
And that's probably why a lot of North Koreans don't travel around the world.
They don't need to.
Why would you?
They don't need to.
Why would you?
Oh dear, incredible. So we're gonna speak with our esteemed guest Johnny Shawadi Sorrow in a wee while, but I think it's time for our old commercials. Here we go.
Fantastic.
Oh, what's up with you? Arsenal lost again, have they?
What wouldst thou for thy final breakfast, Ranyard?
I could murder a bowl of Alpen, Governor. Oh, that's more like it. Raisins, almonds,
Wheat flakes, sultanas, we must do this again tomorrow. Well, he can't.
no, we can't, can we?
Hold fast! The king has granted this man a pardon.
Pardon?
I said, hold fast, the king has granted this man a pardon.
Alpen. Altogether a tastier breakfast.
Don't forget to watch next week's cereal list.
Tweed perfume. Mrs. Taylor is wearing tweed in a new form. Parfum de toilette spray. Mrs. Stewart wears tweed. New tweed parfum de toilette spray. Mrs. Richardson wears tweed. New tweed parfum de toilette spray. Wear tweed, the finishing touch.
I'm a happy knocker-upper and I'm popular beside, 'cause I wake 'em with a cuppa and tasty mother's pride. Then they're off in a flash and a rush. It's the bread and a dash and a push. It's the bread with a flash and a dash and a rush and a push. Like I said, it's the bread. It's the mother's pride bread. It makes 'em love work. They're going berserk to get off to work. It's in the way I wake 'em by bringing to the side the bread we freshly bake 'em. Fantastic mother's pride.
She flies like a bird in the sky. She flies like a bird, and I wish that she was mine. She flies like a bird, for me all I see her fly. No, I can't.
Slimming Magazine approves Nimble as part of your calorie control diet because Nimble is real bread but lighter. Only 40 calories a slice.
Why can't I get things really white again? Week after week, my whites seem to get grayer.
Hello, Sue. You've got gathering grey. You need new Extra Power Fairy Snow with Perborate.
Why?
Because it's charged with Perborate Plus, which penetrates right through the greyness that gathers and gets white to the heart of your wash. Look, even if we wash the towel inside this pillowcase, Fairy Snow will penetrate and get rid of the gathering grey.
Some hope.
Fairy Snow gets straight. It's got Perborate. It gets white to the heart of the wash.
Says you.
I do. Extra Power Fairy Snow with Perborate. There's not a single fibre it won't penetrate.
It's white. Beautifully white.
Because new Extra Power Fairy Snow with Perborate Plus penetrates right through gathering grey and gets white to the heart of the wash.
Esso are investing £3,000 million in developing North Sea oil, and the benefits are already flowing into Britain. Through 300 miles of undersea pipelines supplying much of Britain's oil and gas, flowing into massive investment in new refining technology to give you more of the quality products you'll need, flowing through 500 miles of underground pipeline, keeping distribution costs down. And North Sea revenues are flowing into Britain's treasury at the rate of £4 million a day. Esso are competitive, forward-looking, and we get things done, which is good for you, good for us, and good for the future of Britain.
Just one cornetto, give it to me. Delicious ice cream, of Italy. Delight and gioca dream. Give me cornetto, the world's ice cream.
Proper adverts for proper people. It is wonderful stuff. We were talking off air then about the Pyongyang brewery, come via Ushers of Trowbridge, and there was a very good point that people thought that they were actually making weapons, and so they had to send in inspectors to make sure that this brewing equipment.
Do you think they're putting incendiaries into the pies?
Yeah. It's all completely true. All completely true. Anyway, you're listening to the Nostalgia and Comedy Show on Black Country Extra. I'm Dave Dinsdale. I have Paul Jennings, our reporter and local historian, in the room. Well, it's now time to introduce a living legend, a West Midlands comedy hero. Ladies and gentlemen, please go wild and crazy for Johnny Sorrow.
Whoa!
Thank you very much. Thank you, and a pleasure to be here.
Lovely. So you are an absolute legend. Let's start at the beginning of your career. How did you get into the wonderful world of comedy?
Well, I've always been a creative person.
You have.
But not necessarily with a creative outlet. So I've done a bit of...
Is that philosophy?
I've no idea. But I've done a bit of amateur acting.
Yeah.
So basically I am an actor rather than a comedian.
Oh, I see.
But I wanted to get into the wonderful world of comedy.
Yeah.
Because, I've always loved comedy. My first love was Laurel and Hardy when I was a kid.
Yes.
And I progressed through Jasper Carrot, Monty Python, stuff like that. I always wanted to be involved. I didn't think there's any way you could ever be involved.
Yeah.
And then I saw in the Express and Star a gig at the Lamp Tavern in Dudley.
Yeah.
For a local comedy night. I thought, wow. So I went down there, and I saw there was a couple of obviously professional comedians, but there's also people being given a chance, open spots.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wow, I didn't know this existed. I just thought it was, professional.
Like an underground movement.
Yeah, and I thought, wow, you can be involved in this kind of thing. So I started doing a bit of research, and I started attending, more of these type of gigs in Birmingham and places. And then eventually I plucked up the courage to have a go. But I didn't want to be a comedian because it's not my kind of thing. But I thought, if I be a character, play a part of a comedian. So I kind of came up with this idea of a guy who used to be a comedian before the so-called alternative comedy started, and he was on the cusp of something, but then his career was blighted by alternative comedy. But now he was trying to make a bit of a comeback, although he hadn't changed the act so much. But he was trying to give it another go, basically. Yeah. And that's where it sort of came from.
So
really.
what year were we talking about when you...
This was about 2003, 2004.
Okay, so we've discussed this on the show many times before about the limited number of openings for people. Where were you able to play?
Well, I saw, again, I think it was in the Evening Mail, I saw that they were having... it was either a Red Nose Day or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the station in Sutton Coldfield pub, they were having it was like a gong show type thing, kind of thing. So anyone could have a go.
That's Karen Bailey's place.
Correct. Yeah. That was this. That's right. Anyone could have it. So I phoned up the number, and they said, yes, you can come along. And what do you call? Blah, blah, blah. So I said, yes, it's only 5 minutes, but it's a kind of... So I said, OK, great. So I went and... Well, I didn't think I'd... I was nervous as anything, obviously, but it didn't go too badly. I managed to do the 5 minutes without being gonged off.
Were they curious as to what was happening next then?
Probably. But then through that I met a couple of great people. I met a guy called Dave Powner.
Yes.
Lovely bloke.
Absolutely.
And I talked to him afterwards, and he said, "Love your act, Johnny. I run a gig in Wolverhampton.
Yeah, I'm laughing.
At the Varsity Tavern.
Yep.
Why don't you come down?" So it just sort of progressed from that. So I did the Varsity Tavern, and from there I met other people who told me about other local gigs kind of thing, and told me about London, Manchester, all these types of places where you can have, do these open spots, they called them. And so I sort of slowly built it up from there. It was trial and error, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, not all the gigs were great successes. In fact, there were some complete nightmares. But I could have learned as I went along, kind of thing.
So did you play a gig to one person?
Yeah, that is true. It was my first ever gig. It was my first ever gig in London.
Yeah.
And I thought, London, I was told it was just off the Tottenham Court Road.
Yeah.
I had this vision in my head on the train down. I thought, massive place.
Gold pavements.
Absolutely packed, 100 people plus in the audience. I get there to this tiny little pub. There was... just the acts there, and then they were going to pull the gig.
Yeah.
this one bloke came in who was staying at a local chain hotel across the road. He said, "I'm here for comedy." I said, "Oh, okay, we'll do the gig then." And he said, and his name was Albert. It was Albert, but he was from Yorkshire. Yeah. And he goes, "All right, well, I'll do the gig for me, but before you start, word of warning, I ain't a laugher." So I thought I was despondent, to be honest. But on the train back, I was thinking about it. I thought, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that. So yeah, that was true, and I did use it as one of my opening lines.
So how much would that have cost you to go all the way to London?
Don't talk to me.
Would it have been train and tube?
It was expensive.
Yeah.
Even in them days.
And you get nothing out of it.
Yeah. Well, I did. I got that gag.
Okay. So, what type of act did you have at the time? Has it changed much from what you do then?
It did change. Yeah. I mean, it was just like a sort of a failed comedian who was rubbish, telling terrible gags, and commenting on the fact that he wasn't getting anywhere through it.
And so there was a slight bitterness to it as well. Wasn't
there? Yeah. Because the realisation that the comebacks failed. So then he starts ranting and raving.
I just love your rants, I really do. Sorry, Johnny.
No, thanks for that, Paul. But so that became part. I was getting more laughs from the bitterness and the rants. So I thought, okay, so yeah. But like I said, it was like serving an apprenticeship. Like I learnt from each gig. The first year was totally invaluable. You know, I was going to all these gigs in Manchester, London, wherever I could get a gig. Really, I was learning as I went along till finally. I've got something. I've got a decent 5 minutes that 9 times out of 10 did work, and I've built it up from then.
Well, there's nothing wrong with a bit of bitterness. Do you remember, Paul, the first time you saw Johnny Sorrow?
Yes. The first time I ever met Johnny was I was tasked to pick him up, to take him to a gig. So I picked him up near to where he lived, and you said, about the amateur dramatics and everything like that. But you've not mentioned the fact that you're quite method. So, never met you before in my life, never seen your act, nothing like that. Heard about you, but never. And you were in character, so I picked you up and I tried to talk to you as like, a compatriot, a fellow comedian. We've been through the highs, we've been through the lows. We've got something in common. We've got something in common with the greats. When you talked about your bad gig, you had that 1,000-yard stare that we all have. Yes. Like, you're reminiscing, reliving the nightmares. But you wouldn't break character. And I just thought, have I picked up this sort of mental patience?
And then later in the night he found out he had.
And you just wouldn't break character. It totally unnerved me. But then you did your act. But it didn't come as a surprise to me, because for sort of an hour driving you up the road, it was you. So I just thought, is he just being him and everything? But obviously I've seen you since, and I know that it's just a facade.
Yeah.
A very good one.
But there are a few people like that. I did a gig in, it was actually in Dudley. I think it was Dudley. It wasn't Dudley Labour Club. I think it was Dudley Conservative Club. I had a miserable time, as you can imagine. But they had a singer on who did an impression of Neil Diamond, but he actually thought he was Neil Diamond. So he talked to you as Neil Diamond, and he goes, we're going to do a song now. It's one that I wrote myself in 1965. I did it for a little band, you might have heard it, called the Monkeys. Yes, called I'm a Believer. And he's going through all this. And he was a car salesman from Redditch.
Wow. Well, I suppose if you were a car salesman from Redditch, you had to be a believer.
Yeah, it was very
Was he
weird.
really method when he was at the Monkeys and started throwing his own excrement? This one's for you, Mum.
No, but Paul, you are correct. I was very into being the character for the whole day of a gig.
The whole day?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, from when I got up, I was going to be that character. I found, to me, that was the way it worked for me. I had to totally believe it myself. If you want other people to believe it, you've got to believe it, 100% yourself, and you've got to be 100%.
Well, I'm sorry. After taking you up to the gig, I believed I was Johnny Sorrow. To be honest, that's how good it was. It did unnerve me though, mate. But now, fair enough, Yeah.
First time I saw you was Smallbrook Queensway. Do you remember that one?
Oh, the Sunflower Lounge.
Sunflower Lounge, yeah. And I think there were 11 acts on, and I was number 11. And it was overrunning. So I said, well, it's all right, I'll bail out. Doesn't matter, I've got some friends with me, I'll have a drink. And the acts were generally quite awful. It was I could give you some of the names, you go, oh yeah, well it would be. And the next day, the friends that I went with were just talking about one act. So you came on, did your opening bit, and we go, what is going on here? This little old man clearly doesn't know where he is. He's having a go. And for anybody who hasn't seen your act, and I imagine a lot of people listening have seen your act, they'll know how it builds and it builds and you get a momentum going, and by the end of it you've got the whole room on your side. And that's what happened, and it was actually like watching magic appear in front of you. And you have a catchphrase which we might touch on.
Well, don't talk to me about catchphrases.
There you go. And they were doing it the next day. And I think we then went to see you at the Ivy Bush in Edgbaston. Again, there was
or the Custard Factory, perhaps.
Well, that's the first time I met you.
Ah.
I met you for the first time at the Custard Factory when we played to an audience of 6, I think. And somebody heckled. And that was actually the partner of the promoter of the gig. But at least it managed to flesh out time, And that's the first time I actually got to meet you. And then, of course, you were at the inaugural gig of the legendary Hollybush in Cradley Heath. And we've made a point of not talking about the Hollybush thus far, because we've all played there. Everybody in the room here has played there. And you were actually on a support act for Gary Delaney.
Correct.
And there were 5 people in there.
And a dog.
And a dog.
Yes.
I remember the dog. So what's your view now of the Hollybush, where you are seen as one of the original Bush legends?
Well, to be honest, I remember that day I was walking down the road in Cradley, and this is before Tesco's was even built, so that was just like a building site.
Yep.
And I was thinking, is this a joke? There ain't no pub here.
Well, there were barriers everywhere. It was like an assault course to get in there. It was like the adventure game.
It was like a bomb site, and I saw this like old pub at the bottom of the road, but it looked closed. It looked derelict.
Still does.
There was boards on the windows and everything. I thought, that can't be it. But there was nothing else, literally nothing else there.
Yeah.
So I carried on walking. I went in. I thought, what the hell? Dinsey, what have you done to me? and I did the gig.
Yeah.
Like I said, there was 5 people and a dog.
Yeah.
And I came away, I thought, this place will never last.
No.
But of course,
it has outlived everybody.
It's turned out to be the greatest gig in the West Midlands.
Yes.
It's a lovely place. I'd advise any comedian thinking of having a go or starting to go to the Hollybush in Cradley, because it's so supportive, so loving. The crowd down there, the regulars and people that just walk in, they're so supportive and fantastic, and they're laughers, which is the most important thing. But it's just a lovely, lovely place for comedy.
Yeah. Well, we are going to do a big piece about the Hollybush, probably in our next programme, because they have an annual comedy festival called Bushfest, the smallest comedy festival in the world. And you play every year?
I played most years, I think.
Because you have different characters now, don't you?
There is another character.
You did branch out a little.
I have branched out, yes. And I was working with another comedian at the Edinburgh Festival doing a show called the Bob Brackleman Appreciation Society with a guy called Richard Swan IV.
Oh, yes.
And so I have done other things.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, well, you say you've done Edinburgh. You did have quite a bit of success in your early days.
Well, call it luck, I don't know, but we did win an award, yes. We won the Malcolm Hardy Comedy Award when we were up there.
That is quite prestigious.
Thank you very much.
So did anything lead from that?
I got a lot more gigs that year,
Yeah.
but nothing else, no.
You didn't hear from Avalon?
No, I didn't hear from Avalon or Jongulars.
Oh dear, oh dear.
Or the BBC.
Oh dear.
Or ITV. Or Channel 4.
All right, stop. We get the idea.
Or the Black Country Bugle Museum.
But you did get to appear in the Leicester Comedy Festival final.
Correct.
Now, how did that go?
Well, I had a very, very good gig. I had a great gig, but I was shunted.
You were.
Why?
Well, it's not for me.
Well, he can't say because he's too modest. I can say because I was there, and I was in the top tier. So we've got the stalls down below, and then we got the circle above, which is where I was. And the first half of the show didn't go particularly well, in my opinion. And then the second half came to light when Johnny came on, and all the people where we were at the top, we were rolling around, absolutely fantastic. And at the end, they then announced the winner. They said in third place it's so-and-so, and in second place it's so-and-so. So we were all there going, oh, it's quite obvious who's won. And I said, and the winner is, and I shan't mention his name because he's quite a successful comedian now, but it wasn't you. And everybody upstairs going, hang on, what's happened?
Well, they are then. Right. Comedians are loath to sort of broach this subject because you come across as bitter.
Nothing wrong with being bitter.
What is your opinion of comedy competitions?
When you first start off, I think they're possibly a good idea, but I do think that sometimes the results are preordained, shall we say, because I do know that sometimes local producers and local agents of certain people are usually involved in the organising of said competitions, and so sometimes they're used as a vehicle to promote future coming tours or future coming things of, but I've got no actual evidence. This is just what I've heard.
Well, we were there at Leicester, and when they announced the person who had won, that person had been on in the first half, and we all went, who? Because we didn't remember him. There was nothing about the act that stood out, and I think there's a lot in what you say. I will tell you a little story, and I'll be very careful about names or whatever, but I actually won a competition to be a judge at the BBC New Comedy Awards, one of the heats, right? It was done at a prestigious venue, I shan't say where. And admittedly, I did have quite a lot to drink, but
you surprised me, didn't you?
So at the end, we'd all taken into a room and said, right, who do you think won? And to me, it was quite obvious who'd won. It was this ginger-haired gentleman from Manchester. From what I've seen, is still going, but never made it anywhere. That was his big chance. And this female producer from the BBC came in and said, well, what did you think of so-and-so? And I said, she wasn't very good, not really bothered. And then she came back and said, well, I think she was really good, She really comported herself really, really well. I went, no, she was no good. That guy, he was, the ginger, he was really good. And in the end, we had sort of a fight at the end, and there were 5 judges, because she was one of the judges. And she had the casting vote, because the 4 people on the panel, she said, right, show of hands then, and 2 went for my guy, including me, 2 went for the other guy. She had the casting vote and gave it to the one female comedian who was on the bill. Not saying there's anything untoward with that. That is what's happened, and that's when you're actually in the room and actually seeing it for yourself. She'd already decided who'd won.
Well, you might say that,
didn't you? Is that your agent? So
I think that's the BBC.
They've realised their mistake coming to get you. So what's your worst gig? Or what you consider to be your worst gig?
Well, to be honest, my worst gigs, my nightmare gigs, are the gigs where people, the audience, don't really get what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. I used to feel empty when you come away from it.
Yeah.
I don't mind having a bad gig, but as long as the people, but when they're not even listening, or then they've got no soul in the heart, as far as I'm concerned. it's obvious what I'm trying to do. It's from, people that have seen my act. But if sometimes they totally believe that they just think you're a crap comedian. They don't get the irony of it.
Well, I put on a gig for the 2010 Birmingham Comedy Festival, I think, in the small room at the Glee. So I was able to invite my favourite people along, and you were on. And I brought my people from work. So they're not comedy fans. They're people who think they like laughing and they've seen something on the television. And they think, yeah, I'll probably have a good night. And I'll speak to one lady the next day. She was in her 60s, and she said, that poor old man. That poor old man. He got up there, he was having a go, and she just didn't get it at all.
But I take that as a compliment, because if they truly believe, then as an actor, I've done a good job.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because if they truly believe, but I don't get why would they, can they not see the irony of it? But,
No.
So it's a double-edged thing, isn't it? Yes, I've done a good job as an actor, but comedy-wise, it's not worked because they've just felt sorry for me rather than
I know,
be laughers.
Well, I did one down at the Bush, and I said about my grandfather dying, which was a joke. It led into 5 minutes worth of that type of material. And she said to someone afterwards, wasn't it a shame about his grandfather dying? I go, no, it's a joke. But you put so much energy into your act. I've got to say about the one that you did down at was it Land Rover, Damson Wood, where you put so much in it that your nose started to bleed.
No.
and you carried on because you thought you had just a bit of a sniffle, and there's blood pouring from your.
Now, I must say, at the time, I was actually training to run a marathon, and I think it was possibly something to do with that.
Okay.
Because I was running a marathon for Acorns Children's Hospice at the time.
Yeah.
So I think that's what caused. But I do remember that gig. Yes, but I carried on, didn't I?
Well, you did, because you finished off the gig and then had to be taken to hospital. Didn't you lose half a pint of blood or something?
Something like that. Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So, what's your best gig?
I can't really say there's one definitive best gig. I mean, I've had probably my favourite gigs are possibly some of the ones at the Bush, just because of the love you get back from the audience.
Yeah.
It's only a small place. I mean, that one you mentioned in Leicester. I mean, that big theatre.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that was fantastic performing at a big theatre.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I prefer the more intimate gigs, because the between the audience and you, if you're getting love from them and they're getting love from you, and there's nothing more important than that. I don't care if I'm not being paid. Well, obviously at the Bush, but that's more important to me. Coming away feeling I've really achieved something. I've bonded, I've connected with people, and that to me, they're the best gigs.
Yeah, people forget that, but it's been great to have you here. We will definitely have to bring you back, because we are going to do a bit about Bushfest, and I know that you've got so many stories to do. And Paul, are you okay to come back for that as well?
Absolutely. Really look forward to it, John.
It is. It's been wonderful to see you.
Well,
all.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to go anywhere these days.
It is, but it's been wonderful. Again, at Black Country Extra, you've been listening to me, Dave Dinsdale, from the wonderful world of Dinsey. You've been listening to Paul Jennings.
Hi, bye.
And you've been listening to the legend that is Johnny Sorrow.
Evening.
It is. It's wonderful. Please join us again on Black Country Extra.